Anyway, that's what the Navy gets you for coffee.
Oh, tell me about it.
So I have 9 o'clock. I guess that means it's time to call the meeting to order. I'm Chris Christensen, and the first order of business is to turn your phones off and your microphones on. So if we're all ready that way, then we'll start with introductions. To my right is,
Jack Balcom, trustee.
and to my left,
Tom Bolin, Treasurer, Town of Merrimack.
in the audience. Oh, I'm
Bill
sorry.
Wilk on the phone, trustee.
Sorry, Bill Wilkes. And also on the phone from Cambridge Trust. I'm not sure who's there now. Judy, you want to introduce yourselves?
Judy Noel is here, Eric Jusome, Lindsay Donovan, and I believe Dave Lynch is on the line.
Yes, I am. Good morning.
Good morning, Dave. Nice to meet you. And Matt Chevenel from the school
You as well,
district is in the audience, and will speak to us later. And the first order of business on the agenda is the minutes of November 22nd. Do we have a motion?
Yes, I move that we accept the minutes of November as I gave you a couple of amendments and you've changed them.
Okay.
That we approve.
as
I will
distributed.
second those.
Okay. And all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Motion carries. And next item of business is a report from Judy Knoll and the Cambridge Trust Group. And I guess I want to tell you, I just was handed a check that's going to be deposited. I'll mail it to you today for $2,305,000 for Capital Reserve Fund distribution. So with that extra $2 million, Judy, you've got the floor.
Wow.
Okay, thank you. As I mentioned, Dave Lynch, who is our Chief Investment Officer, has joined us today, and I'm not sure how we want to begin. I know on the agenda it mentions MS9 and DRA. Chris, you and I spoke about that yesterday, so I don't know if you want to speak about that this morning.
Well, I think the first thing that we had a question about was, at our last meeting, there was a question about reporting interest or income on the capital reserve funds and how they wanted to show it on the ledgers or on the whatever their computer portal is.
Okay.
And I don't know if
Yeah.
we've gotten anything back from them on that yet or not. My recollection is you were going to talk to them since you guys are the ones that enter the stuff into the portal.
Well, we do enter the information into the portal, and I did have a conversation with Paul McCallie, and I know there was discussion about going back to DRA to see if there was any interest in having that portion of the portal adjusted so that fees could be reported both against principal and income. And I don't know where that discussion ended.
Okay. My understanding from meetings with other trustees is that different towns do it differently. We take everything and keep the income separate. Some towns add the income to the principal at the end of the year, and some pay the fees out of income only, some out of income and principal, which I don't think is legal, but I know some do it. And some pay fees and so forth out of general government funds, not out of trustee funds. So there's kind of a mishmash
That's
of what's
correct.
going on, and I'm not
Right.
sure that DRA is really clear on it. Without trying to be insulting, their new reporting system makes it look like they're even less clear than they ever were before. So I guess we've beat that one to death for now. wouldn't be making any changes until July 1st, and we got plenty of time to,
Yeah, I'm happy
Figure
to
that
work
out.
with you on that.
okay?
And, going to Tom Donovan's office to have that discussion at the Attorney General's office.
Okay. And then I guess the next thing was portfolio review. We got a lot of stuff on the agenda, so I don't want this to
Right.
be too lengthy.
Okay,
But
yeah,
I think the thing that came to mind initially was at our June meeting, June 2020, and then again at our November meeting, we thought we gave guidance that said, get rid of some of these IT stocks that have a 1% yield, and let's get some things that have a 3 or 4% yield, because we can't spend growth. And we'd like to be able to spend more, especially in the scholarship funds. In the course of doing the year-end report that goes into the annual town meeting report, I noticed that when the state reporting format comes out, there's a column in there that says fees and expenses total. And that's all on the income side. And when you look at one of the lines for perpetual care, for example, the income was about $6,000. The fees and expenses were $7,500. That doesn't make us look very good. We know that we're working on a total return basis, but some casual person reading the report and saying, wait a minute, we're losing money on every grave site? We can't do that in perpetuity. And this is supposed to be perpetual care. So once again, I'm looking at that and thinking, either we need a different reporting format or we need to edge up the yields. Having said that, if Eric or Lindsay or Dave want to talk about the alignment of the portfolio, that's the place to start.
Yeah, I'll jump in right now. This is Eric. So after our meeting in November, right after the meeting, we actually had a call with David Lynch. So David Lynch is now involved with the management of this portfolio. And the first round of trade that we initiated back in early December, the intent was to sell, the stocks that had no yield, and we started to add some more stocks that had higher yields. And since that time, more of Dave has allocated more of the team's resources to, finding more yield. We're doing a little more optimizations of, some of the stocks in the portfolio. And there's a second round of trades that we're just about ready to finalize that addresses the, basically what you just mentioned, the tech weights. There's, substantial reductions in both Apple, Microsoft, eliminating Citrix, looking at selling Starbucks and Accenture. So bringing down that tech weighting, as well as some other stocks, like Disney, unfortunately, doesn't have to pay a dividend right now, and looking to increase, some of the utilities as well as some of the healthcare stocks that had, and some of the REITs that have higher dividend yields, as well as, we did some additional research on some of the ETFs that have higher yields, and we're in the process of adding that to the portfolio as well. So I'm comfortable to say that, the yield will be increasing. I think we have a path now to getting it to 2.5% to 2.75% in that range, or a little more tweaking that we're working on right now. So I think we're on the right path. We wanted to do it in a 2 to 3 phase pronged approach, not do 60 trades all in one month, but do it over a deliberate course of action. And also putting our research minds behind this, where and looking at potential different benchmark, looking at make sure that we're not all of a sudden going to have sector weights that are way out of whack. I know the ultimate goal is to increase the income and return as secondary. But that being said, we don't want to have stocks that are paying 7 or 8% dividends and have them go down 20 or 30%. So I think the more we've been doing a lot of research on some of the names that we're going to be increasing to bigger position sizes, with the intent that we can hold these for multiple years and reduce the overall portfolio turnover that we had, especially in the first half of 2020 for especially scholarship and the income and principal account. So I think we're on the right path. Income will be increasing. But, we're doing it in probably, and this will be phase 2 of possibly a 3-phased approach to increasing the income. And we're doing additional work on, especially the scholarship account, which is the smaller out of the 3 accounts where we have bond mutual funds in place. And we're going to be increasing the allocation to the high yield and emerging market debt that both have 4% yields. There also, there's another fund that we could use for more yield. However, we're debating it. It has almost 7+ year duration, and it's uncomfortable to add to duration when interest rates are near historic lows and spreads are very, very tight. So, we could get the yield, but we'd also be looking at some potential downside risk, especially if you look at what's happened year to date, where long rates have moved higher, and credit spreads are almost priced for perfection. So we definitely heard your concerns. It was elevated to senior management. I spoke to Dave Lynch, who was on the call today, and we're working in conjunction together and with Lindsay to increase the yield to these portfolios.
I just want to pipe up. This is Bill Wilkes, and I want to say I don't necessarily want you to think, well, get out of all technology. I mean, there are technology companies that pay, a reasonable dividend. So to say, and I don't even know off the top of my head today what Microsoft's dividend is, but I know they pay
it's about 1%. Yeah, it's about 1%. And Apple's about 60 basis points.
Obviously,
but again, you're
a lot. So the dividend, inversely as a percent has gone down. But anyways,
those will still remain a percent of the those will still remain a percent of the portfolio. But Apple right now is 6%, and that's going to be reduced just because of the low dividend yield. But it still will be held in a smaller form.
Don't unbalance the portfolio and not be in technology. Be in technology that are good companies that pay dividends. Don't be in technology like Facebook and Twitter and whatever else you want to say, Poshmark or whatever, that have no dividends. Be in some of the quality, well-respected, well-known technology companies that have dividends.
Yeah, and that is,
I'm one out of 3, but I'm one out of 3, but that's my message.
And we understand that message. And again, the portfolios, mentioning all those tech names, the portfolios never owned those names, and we would never own those names unless they paid a dividend. So the stocks that were behind the portfolio from the strategy, had dividend yields. But as you mentioned, Bill, the run up in equity prices, a lot of these, like Microsoft's dividend yield is down to 1%. Apple is less than 1%. Still very strong.
But it's not 1% based on what we paid for it. So,
that is true. Yes.
That
Yeah. So the book yield is higher. Correct.
Yeah. Exactly.
So Dave Lynch is on the call as well. I don't know if he has any comments that he wants to share with the group.
I can offer a few comments, although I know you don't want this to take forever, and I'm certainly here to answer questions. I've been actively involved with the team on this. Eric has a set of trades that really he can hit go on as soon as this meeting wraps that will start to take the portfolio into the mid-2s for yield, and then we're working on pathways to head towards that 3% bogey that you have expressed. We're trying to do that prudent, risk-adjusted as best we can. We don't want to chase yield too much, but we hear you with your needs, mandate, duty, desires on this account. So we're working hard on it. We have allocated more research time to increase approved income-based, income-centric instruments, be it ETFs or individual stocks or bonds. And bonds are not to be forgotten here. Eric mentioned some addition to high yield and emerging market debt as another way that we've added some basis points of yield to the portfolio. So we're actively focused on this subject. You're not the only of our clients that is facing these challenges in this low yield environment. We would appreciate some better reinvestment opportunities in the bond market. So to the extent that we do get maybe a little bit of economic resurgence, maybe a steeper yield curve in 2021, that will be helpful and allow us to have more than just equity choices as a way to generate yield. And that will hopefully play out and allow a little more flexibility. But happy to take further questions. Just letting you know that we're working hard on it, and we want to get toward that 3% as expeditiously as possible.
Yeah, and we want it to be, we don't need to, on this call, need to go down every stock, but, there's a lot of quality companies out there, and we're not talking about high-risk companies that pay, between 2 and 3.5% yields at least. This isn't a radical change. It's not anything, we're not out there trying to, buy, I don't even know. I mean, throw Exxon out there as a name. I mean, they say that potentially with $50 oil, Exxon dividend is going to be solid, but, we're not necessarily proposing you buy Exxon unless you think the dividend is solid and there is a future there. We would respect that, but the point is, there's a lot of companies out there that pay good dividends within the range that we've kind of targeted. That we're not talking about doing anything, irresponsible or radical.
Yeah, two that come quickly.
Yeah, understood. Go ahead.
Two that come quickly to mind. No growth here, but telephone and Verizon in communications are both paying 4% or better. IBM, I don't own it, I wouldn't buy it right now, but IBM is paying a 5% dividend. Coca-Cola's a little bit over 3%.
Intel had great results yesterday, and everybody's been down on Intel, but the fact of the matter is they still manufacture more semiconductors than a lot of these companies that you hear that have been high flyers. So, the technology guy that is going to be the CEO that was with Intel for 20 plus years, has got a fantastic track record. So, a company like Intel, I wouldn't give up on them.
Okay, we're not here to.
And the yield on Intel, I think, is high threes or something like that. And they're going to raise their dividend as of yesterday. They announced a 5% dividend increase.
The other thing that I would discuss.
Not trying to pick stocks, but just giving examples.
Okay. The other thing that I looked at when I was going through the portfolio is we've got a lot of small holdings, and when we were managing the funds, we normally capped things at 10% of the portfolio, and maybe if it was rising, we'd ride with it a little bit. We've got a lot of very small holdings, and I'm not uncomfortable if we take a bigger position in a smaller number of companies that we can actually track a little bit better.
Yeah, that was actually one of our first steps in creating this path to higher yield, is to do just that, to pro rata increase things that we've already approved and are comfortable with in our research process, to increase those and then correspondingly decrease some of these smaller positions and in fact eliminate some outright. And then, of course, we're doing that while we're trying to approve brand new stuff to add. But yeah, that pro rata aspect is something that we're taking into consideration and are part of the trades that Eric and team have teed up for basically today.
Okay. The next thing on the agenda, related issue, is benchmarks. And in our discussion last November, we looked at the benchmarks and said, well, okay, the S&P 500 is a common benchmark, but it really doesn't have anything to do with what our goals are. And if we're looking at mostly equity income, I'm wondering if, and we should maybe talk about changing our investment plan if there's another benchmark or other source of analysis
Yeah,
that we should be looking at for overall consideration.
And that's something we took in.
Go ahead, Eric.
Go ahead. Yeah, I'm sorry. And that's something we took into consideration when we were, doing the optimization for these trades and looking at, potentially moving that S&P benchmark to the NASDAQ U.S. Broad Dividend Achievers benchmark, which has obviously a much higher yield than the S&P. And obviously there's sector weights that are different, but I think that's a benchmark that we're more comfortable with. And it's more broad-based than some of the other income-centric benchmarks where there's much more utility. And I think, and our feeling was there's more sector risk versus the, this NASDAQ U.S. Broad Dividend Achievers Index. I didn't mean to cut you off there, David. If you have something else to add, please feel free.
I think you covered it well. We want to engage and be part of your annual revision. I believe that you're on a June 2021 sort of cycle, and we're happy to collaborate on switching the benchmark outright. We have a variety of secondary benchmarks that we monitor internally, and that NASDAQ Dividend Achievers is the one that is the nearest fit and the one that we're most comfortable with. So I think that is the leader in the clubhouse here, and we'll continue to kind of work with you towards getting something written up that reflects that, or another way incorporates some of the. We wrote a memo of understanding and clarification. I think that was post the November meeting. I was part of drafting that to make reference to these different and clarified initiatives toward 3% and toward higher yield. And so we look to kind of name a benchmark, but also incorporate some of the philosophical aspects that have been clarified and discussed recently.
Good. Thank you very much for that extra detail. Did anybody, Jack or Bill, have any questions on that, Tom?
No.
And that rolls us into the next item on the agenda, which was any changes or other considerations for the investment policy. We're not going to do that today, but I think we all need to be considering that so that when we do our annual rewrite, we'll pick up on that, and that has to be done this summer. So we'll keep an eye on that, and that'll probably come up on an agenda much later in the spring, unless anybody else has any comments on the investment policy for today. Okay, the next one was the realignment of the scholarship fund investments, and we've already covered that, I think. So I don't have anything else on the portfolio. If there's anything else we have from Cambridge Trust, Bill, do you have anything?
No, I think I'm good. I think, we've discussed in very fine detail in the last couple of meetings about, how we want to move the portfolio. So I don't have anything further at this point.
Okay, I'm going to skip ahead to one item on the agenda that's the actual scholarship amounts, just because we've been talking about that fund. I received an extra $6,000, $1,000 for the LEGO Fund, and $5,000 for scholarships from the Watson Foundation. And I wrote back to Barbara Watson and said, do you want to increase the scholarships this year? We have enough in reserves that we could do that by making it from 1,000 to say 1,250 or some other number. I have not heard back from her. I wrote to Gary Greenleaf about that scholarship fund and have not heard back from him about any changes. That's a $400 scholarship. It'd be nice to raise it to $450 or $500. And I think we have the reserves to do that if we get the current income up a little bit. And the same thing with the Gibson. I did get a note back from Tom Gibson. They're content with a $3,500 scholarship that we're doing right now. But, long run, they'd certainly like to increase that as well. And we need a little extra income to do that. So I'm going to skip over that part. And if there's anything else on scholarships,
No, I looked over what you sent us.
okay. Then I'm going to move on to the school district and bring Matt Chevenel to the table, if you will.
Chris, do you need us to stay on the line?
Not unless you want to talk about varnish and gym floors.
No, but I will plan to give you a call in the next couple of weeks so we can talk about the allocation of management fees.
Okay.
All right?
Yep, that's a good idea. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all.
All right, thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Oh, thank you. Okay, Matt, you're up.
Yeah, thank you. I'm here representing the Merrimack School District, and as you well know, times are hard out there for people with COVID and unemployment and everything like that. So we're trying to limit the impact of what we do on taxation and look for alternative funding sources. We have had some COVID relief funds come from the federal government via the state that we have utilized fully, and now we're looking for projects that have been historically on our capital improvement plan but have been put off because of other more urgent needs, but they've all been taxpayer funded. So the trustees has the ability to allocate funds, and we thought we would come before you today to make a request and give you the specificity of what we're looking at. We're looking at both bleachers and the gym floor. We're looking at a total of $315,000.
As requested by the host, please hang up.
Thought you did that. You still there, Bill?
Oh, my gosh. All the way from Keene.
Yeah, hang on. 320-2324. 320. Two, 324.
Hello.
Hi, Bill.
Welcome back, Bill.
Thank you.
So I don't know if you caught it all. Matt was just introducing his remarks about
Yeah, they want it.
stuff for the capital improvement plan.
Instead of doing some things that were where they got assistance from the federal government, now they potentially would like to do a bleacher and gym floor project was it at the upper elementary?
Well,
or?
he's about to get to that.
Yeah,
so-
I'm about to get to that. So, what we're doing is we're looking for alternative funding sources. At the end of 2019, 2020, where mid-March our world kind of turned up down due to COVID, we had the ability to bring in a $4.7 million surplus because of lack of expenditures needed throughout the rest of that year in order to reduce the tax rate. And so the school portion of the tax rate actually went down around 33 cents. You can correct me, Tom, if I'm wrong on that, but I'm pretty sure that's what happened. And so in building, this year's budget and looking at what we need to do, we've been all the school budgets are either level funded or below last year. So we're trying to remain conservative on where we want to put our money, being sensitive to the requirements of the taxpayers in this town. And we have these projects that have been on the capital improvement plan, but there have been other emerging things that have come up that have been needed, like, we had to replace the boilers at Mastercola Elementary School. We had to do the parking lot at Mastercola Elementary School because that was just in horrid condition. And as you recall, or maybe you don't, that was on the capital improvement plan probably for a good 10 years before we finally got to this. These bleachers have been on the CIP for a while. The first set of bleachers, we're talking about the Smith Gym. These bleachers are original to the construction. They're made out of, they're wooden bleachers. They're the old style bleachers. They're 8 seats high. There's no railings or there's no ADA accessibility. I know that, maybe 30 years ago, if I was on the top of those bleachers, I would kind of balance myself on people's shoulders to get down. But now there's no way I would even venture forward into, being on the top of those bleachers for an event when we get to having events again, So it's one of these things that we've had on our radar. We'd like to replace them with bleachers much in the same way we did the high school, Merrimack High School. We did those bleachers. They have exit ways. They have railings. They're safe and they're handicapped accessible, and they have room for ADA compliant spots in the bleachers where somebody could be with a wheelchair who wants to see a game. Right now, these bleachers do not have that function, and their original equipment to whenever that addition was built that connected the old middle school, which is now James Mastercola Upper Elementary School, and Mastercola Elementary School. Before, they were 2 separate schools, and then they were connected via a hallway, and a gym was built, probably 40, 50 years ago. And those are original equipment, and it's time to replace them with something more modern and something that meets ADA accessibility, and something that the public will feel safer in using. We do repair the welds on them. Every single year we go through them, make sure they're safe, so they are safe. But it's just the structure and the design of them that is terribly outdated and, quite frankly, poses, a safety concern to us. We have not had any incidents that I know, but I know people are very tentative to use them because of their structure and the just nature of the design. It's really old school stuff that's been around forever. So we would like to replace those, and the cost of that is approximately $110,000. Now we move over to,
Just out of curiosity,
Yes,
are there
sir.
any questions about
yeah.
Smith Gym? What does one do with old bleachers?
Well, it's part of the whole contract. When we bid them out, all the materials are removed. There's no sense us maintaining the wood, so it's just part of, removal and replacement. So
Okay.
the company comes in, removes everything, and then where it goes from there, I have no idea.
Interesting.
I know years ago, you can see in the high school some walls and whatnot that looks like it came from a bowling alley. That's because it did. That's because Jim O'Neill recycled an old bowling alley in town and used it to line the walls. When you're going into the main gym, you'll see narrow strips of maple on the wall, and that's from an old bowling alley from years ago. But we don't have any use for these materials. So as part of the contract to reduce costs, we would allow them to take those materials and to sell them on whatever market to reduce the price, and who knows where it's going to go. So it's something that is just going to disappear, much in the same way when we did the high school bleachers. I don't know how many years ago when The high school was in the finals, basketball team, the bleachers on the end, the kids were all excited, they were jumping up and down, and we had some breakage there, so we had to do an emergency repair on that end, and then we did the rest of the bleachers over the course of a couple of years to match what was in the end. And so that's what we're looking at. The bleachers at the middle school, because it was built in the last 17 years, 18 years, 16 years, kind of hard to believe saying that right now. But, those are the type of bleachers we would have with walkways and railings and everything like that, so people could get up and down safely. And so that's basically the Smith Gym. Once we move into the J. Muse bleachers, which used to be the old middle school, those are original equipment also, made of the same material and of the same design, not allowing any railings or walkways or anything like that in those bleachers. Those only go up around four stories, but we have an issue with the floor in J. Muse right now. The floor cannot be sanded again, and the floor is got exceedingly dark over the years. And plus, it's also used as an all-purpose room, because as you know, that's where we serve lunch. So you have cafeteria tables rolling over the hardwood, creating divots in the hardwood, and which if it was on its first sanding, you could sand those out, refinish, whatever. But it's something that right now, some of the nail heads are showing through, and there's not enough material to do another sanding. So they need to be replaced, and it would be nice to take the bleachers that are there, that people sit in when we vote, redo those, get them out of the way, redo all the hardwood floor. And we're kind of debating, because it's used as a all-purpose room where we serve lunch and where we have cafeteria tables. We've looked at different wheels on cafeteria tables that may or may not damage the floor. We haven't found anything suitable. We talked to a lot of our vendors in other school districts. And so it may be a hardwood floor, or it may be something else. It depends what the ultimate use of that's going to be. Can MYA and other groups who eventually will come back to our school district after the pandemic is over and we have no need to fog in the evening. That's how we sanitize all our buildings. But, we're looking at replacing that floor with either another hardwood floor or something else. We have a school district planning and building committee who is in the process of giving us suggestions and looking at alternate materials to do that with, that could be dual purpose. They could be used for basketball. A lot of the MYA uses that for baseball practice too. They get in, they throw the ball around, etc. But this is something that we want to do because we can't refinish. We could strip them, but we can't sand them anymore. And there's no sense stripping them right now if we can't do a sanding job because the nail heads are just showing through. So that floor has been there probably since that structure was built, way before my time, as is the bleachers. So the J. Muse floor would be around $140,000. The J. Muse bleachers, both sides, would be around $65,000. And then the Smith Gym bleachers, we're looking at around $110,000. So the total request is $315,000 that we're, humbly putting before you, today to see if you want to be a part of it or if you want to fund the whole thing. If you decided to fund the whole thing, in talking with the superintendent, we would definitely make sure that there would be some recognition of where the funding came from, because we want to assure the taxpayers that we are looking for alternative funding sources to try and offset what our appropriations are going to be. These aren't budgeted for in the budget for this year. They're on the capital improvement plan, but they've been sliding out as other more important, more relevant to what we're doing right now has kind of jumped a little bit forward. One of that is ventilation in the schools, not because of COVID only, but because of higher than normal CO2 levels in classrooms. And so that's one of the things that you may be seeing coming up in the school district budget. So that's kind of taken a bit of a precedent. We did a study, back in 2007, then we did another study back in 2018, and then the proposal was brought before the board a few months ago for review. So there's a lot of, it's not that we don't want to go ahead and spend taxpayers' money to do this, it's just that we'd like to get it done and then not put the burden on the taxpayers if there's other funding sources available. And so that's why we're
Hey, Matt?
Yes, sir.
So I think you're talking about what they used to call the APR room at J. Muse.
Yeah, they still call it that.
And I know the Smith Gym. I had 3 daughters. I spent hours and hours in both of those gyms for basketball over the years. A question. So the APR room is the footprint is physically smaller than a typical modern gym.
Yes.
Has anybody considered only putting bleachers on one side of that footprint instead of both sides like exists today? Because my experience is that those bleachers, I mean, if anybody was going to have like a bigger event, they would do it in the Smith Gym. And I'm just wondering, obviously it would reduce the cost somewhat if you only put them on one side, but also it would probably make it easier for that to be used as a lunchroom, not having to deal with bleachers on one side. It would be a little more roomy for, if I was designing it, I wouldn't put the bleachers where the kids, who are playing basketball or whatever are sitting, on the sidelines. I would put them on the opposite side. Has anybody discussed anything like that?
No, quite frankly, because they're on both sides. So you would remove both sets of bleachers, and then replace it with one set of bleachers on one side. Is that what you're saying?
So you're saying that they would not put them on both sides, that they just put them on one side?
I'm saying that they would put them on both sides of the APR. I think you're suggesting that they put new bleachers on one side, and
I am suggesting that.
Yes.
And I'm suggesting, has anybody considered that? And, based on a lot of experience that I've had in that gym, you don't need bleachers on both sides.
So no, we have not considered that. But you'd still be removing both sets of bleachers, and then
understood.
you'd be replacing it with only one set of bleachers on one side.
Understood.
Well, I think that's a good question. The Planning and Building Committee may
That'd be
get that
something.
from Matt, and they can talk about it.
I can definitely communicate that to them because they kind of, there's a lot of experience on that board, and they kind of give us direction as to what they would like to see and prefer.
A related question I have, and this goes more to the Smith Gym, I think,
Yeah.
because we put a lot of money a few years back into audio-visual
Yeah.
Enhancements there. If the bleachers are all going to be fixed to the walls, or if there's a portion of them that would swivel, say, 45 degrees. Certainly, if we're in the all-purpose room and there's some stuff going on that's on the stage, town meeting style, school board meeting, annual meeting style, being able to have those bleachers facing the stage, or at least partially facing the stage, might be a valuable enhancement. Maybe not, I don't know.
I'd have to check to see if that's a possibility. I understand exactly what you're saying. I understand it would be nice to be able to have those bleachers face the stage, especially when we're doing the deliberative session or something like that. But, yeah, that would be something I'd have to check on.
I'm just thinking some of that kind of stuff, there's a fair amount of time and labor setting up chairs, taking them down, the rest of it.
Yeah,
If you could avoid chairs, you avoid a lot of wear and tear on the floor. Which brings me to another question. I think the Smith Gym has a protective covering for the floor. Is that correct?
there was a protective covering for the floor, if I can remember, when we did voting at the high school, and that was put down. And I think
High school, okay.
yeah, at the high school. I'm not sure about JMU's, the Smith Gym. I'm not sure about that. I know.
I'm just thinking if you're doing all this stuff over again,
Yeah,
might be worth considering. Now, we're not doing the floor to the Smith Gym, just the bleachers.
no, just the
But
bleachers.
I would put that in as a consideration.
Mm-hmm.
The other thought that came to mind when we did visual stuff for the Smith Gym was that every time we have a meeting, and I think Tom looked this up, we spend a couple $1,000
Yeah, I got your email, yeah.
for Bob Malloy.
Yeah.
And we do the same thing, or you do the same thing, when there's a school meeting that needs adequate sound systems. I'm just thinking at some point in time that enhancing the sound systems and the AV stuff in the all-purpose room might be worth considering.
I think, because I know Marcia McGill is going to be here for a few more years, she's definitely not in the position of slowing down, that she would, well, that's Marcia for you, right? And so she would absolutely love that. In fact, she mentioned that to me. If we could look into enhancing the sound system in the JMU's APR, for a number of reasons, just not deliberative session, but for when they hold faculty meetings and everything like that, that's where they hold them. And to have a sound system that would be adequate and, would reach out there and would be, professionally done, that would be a big enhancement for them.
Okay, well, that's not an issue for today, but it's certainly, there's a precedent
Yes.
for doing that, and
Correct.
I think we would probably look favorably upon that in some future day.
Okay.
Yeah.
In the meantime, I
Can I-
passed out, you
can
got a
I-
question, Jack? Go ahead.
Yeah, I sure do. Well, first of all, Matt, thanks for bringing these things forward. But my question is there one, 310, I guess, is a big price tag. If we chop that up, what would be your first priority? Is there something more pressing in one gym than the other, like the ADA compliance or?
I think. See, the problem is the floor. Well, the ADA compliance is the 8-level bleachers in the Smith Gym.
Smith Gym, right, yeah, you get nosebleed when you sit up there.
Right, and it is precarious. And so I think we would probably look at doing that first,
Okay.
if there was a priority.
Okay, well, these projects certainly qualify for some of the trusts.
Okay, I don't know if you got this, Matt, or not. This is a spreadsheet showing the various funds that we have.
Yep.
Did I email that to you?
I think you did, yes.
Okay. As we look down the list of available funds, the Watkins Fund has adequate resources to do 300,000. The Gage and Lawrence Fund is not restricted to age, whereas the Watkins Fund is.
1 through 8?
And, I'm sorry, yes, 1 through 8.
Yep.
And the Watkins Forest Income Fund is similarly restricted to grades 1 through 8. So I'm inclined to take the money out of the Watkins Fund, which also has adequate reserves to do 310,000, plus or minus.
Okay.
I'm sorry?
Okay, I was looking at principal versus income.
Just look on the income side.
Okay, but I see I see we can accommodate the 110,000. Can we take 300,000? out of Watkins.
Hang on.
Is that 797 include available income?
Yeah,
Oh, okay,
yeah, we got $700,000 there.
okay, got it. I mean, I definitely like what you're saying about the AV system for the all-purpose room at JMU's. I mean, that would be a real enhancement.
If you would allow me to come back with an updated number on that, I would be more than happy to do so.
Okay.
Well, we can do that as a
Yeah,
separate issue, but as long as
separate
you-
issue,
as long as you're tearing the room apart,
you might as well.
Right.
if
Right,
it fits in, I think we can afford to do it.
yeah.
And
This
if
is, this
it's-
is nothing we're looking for a decision on like right now. This is something that, you know, we'd like to have a further conversation. I come back, give you some options, whatever. you
Well, I
know.
assume the work will be done in the summertime.
Well, if it's approved, you know, now we could start putting together specs, put things out to bid, and get it done over this summer. It has to be done over a summertime.
Right.
So it's either coming up for this summer, or it'd be, you know, next summer. And, you know, that would be up
Or
to
maybe
you.
one this summer and the other gym the next summer.
Perhaps.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's
Well,
okay, too.
Let me do this. I'm just gonna make a general motion that is that we allocate from the Watkins Fund not to exceed $350,000 for improvements to the Smith Gym and the all-purpose room.
I second it.
Still with us, Bill?
Yeah, I'm with you. I definitely support the concept of improving, the things that have been discussed. But I would like an answer on the APR room as far as, putting bleachers on both sides. And I guess if we allocate, can we unallocate?
Yes.
Chris? Because I don't like committing to just an open checkbook without knowing more details. So I support this conceptually, but I don't want to lock us into something that, without a little more details.
Well, you saw-
Okay, and I'm gonna,
Well, there was a write-up, a more detailed write-up than what we were presented this morning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you mean by
Well,
more.
we haven't answered the question about whether or not we should or shouldn't put bleachers on both sides of the APR. Quite frankly, I don't know if it matters, but, I don't know if there's a clear answer on what kind of materials they'd be putting on the floor in the APR, that,
well,
depending
I
on
think
what you
that's
put on
gonna, that's all gonna come out, more detail from the Planning and Building Committee, but also, as you, put it out to bid, different contractors may come up with different proposals, and certainly, they can ask for proposal with those options.
See,
Well,
right.
there's all kinds of materials on gym floors, believe me.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
And so,
They're
but,
not all hardwood.
right. Right now, if you were to give us a general commitment for the $350,000, that would give us, the credibility with going out to bid, knowing that there is support. Because people right now, contractors are busy, they're very busy. And they don't want to chase ideas with nothing behind them. So we could, with your approval, go to the next step to get some drawings and specifications and bids and different options for you to look at. But if we had the commitment now, that would kind of give us the leverage to say, hey, we have a commitment for X amount of dollars to fund these projects. We are soliciting bids for this and do it in a formal fashion.
I just like, I don't like that I hope the answer isn't, about the bleachers and the APR isn't like, oh, well, we have them on both sides now, so we need to have them on both sides in the future. I just like people to think a little more outside the box, and my point is, we don't have to do it exactly the way it was done originally, or what we got used to. Let's think outside the box a little bit. Anyways, I will support this. So, I just wanted to discuss a few things. That's all.
Yeah, no, and Bill, Mr. Wilkes, we would definitely run that up the flagpole, see how it flies, talk to a number of people, including mostly, our school district planning and building committee, to see how they feel about that. So that would be something that we would get back to you on, and not,
Okay.
not just because we did it one way doesn't mean we have to do it the same way going forward. And that's something that we would honor, and that's something we would check out and get back to you on.
I'm historically seeing a progression here. At one point in time, this room that we're in used to be a basketball court. The all-purpose room was probably the first big basketball court in town, because we hadn't built the addition to the high school at that point.
Correct.
And of course, obviously, the Smith Gym is more recent, and the Ferry schools didn't come along until 1968.
Right.
So the original premise when that all-purpose room was built, probably a lot different than how it might
what
be
it is
used now. So some flexibility in the planning there would be an interesting exercise.
Mm-hmm.
Then on the elementary schools, we went from APRs to adding gyms.
Yeah.
Yes. All right.
And we don't have a good auditorium in town anyplace, but that's a different question.
Right, yeah.
Having said all of that, is there more discussion, or should we call the question?
Call the question.
Call the
All in
question.
favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, aye, aye.
Aye.
All
Aye.
in favor, good, motion carries.
Am I all set?
You're all set.
Yeah, Jim O'Neill always taught me, when you're done, leave right
Right.
away.
Yep. Yeah, Jim tutored me too. I was on the school board when Jim was still here.
Yeah.
We went through 2 union negotiations.
Actually, we do have one more item on the agenda.
See?
Yeah.
See? I
Oh,
didn't leave
that's right,
fast
yeah.
enough.
$29,202
Oh, right.
for cases and other power adapters for Chromebooks.
Yes.
You bought the Chromebooks with the federal funding, is that right?
We bought the Chromebooks with the federal funding, and you guys have committed to get $98,000 beforehand to purchase Chromebooks. And we've had, a very lag in the delivery, but we have the cases and we have the power cords and whatnot. So, power adapters.
All right, so do we have a motion on the 29,000?
Yep. I move we allocate the $29,000 for the invoice for the Chromebook cases and power adapters.
I'll second it.
Okay. All in favor? Oh, and the question is, or the motion is to take the money from which fund?
Ooh. Watkins?
Are they going to all different grades?
Yeah, what grades are they going to?
I think these are going to be primarily for K through 8, 1 through 8. I don't think these are high school notebooks, Chromebooks.
Okay, then that would be easy to accommodate. Multiple funds.
Okay, so you want to go out of which fund, Jack?
Heck, we could even do it under the Gage and Lawrence.
Well, I'll try to save that for something
Okay.
comes up for the high school.
Okay, why don't we stick with the Watkins?
Okay. Okay, did you hear that, Bill? Watkins Fund?
Yes, I did.
Okay,
Watkins Fund.
all in favor?
Aye.
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 Now you're done, I think.
Now I'm done. Thank you very much, gentlemen. As always, been a pleasure to be before you, and nice to see you again, Tom. Give my best to Paul. All right.
All right, thank you very much,
Thank
man.
you.
We appreciate all the added detail that you bring with you.
You know, one day we'll get you out of that basement. Are you still in that?
I actually moved up to the first floor,
Oh, okay.
which is very fortuitous. I won't bore you with the details, but the end of October 30th, I fell off my deck after salting it, and I broke my ankle, and I had to go in for surgery and everything like that. And so it was helpful not having to go up and down those stairs. So I'm on the first floor now.
One day we're gonna replace that building, I swear, before well, in my lifetime.
Yeah, before we're across the street, kind of resting, huh?
Always been surprised some prankster didn't do something to it on Halloween.
Yeah.
Okay.
Correspondence is next.
Yeah, I think we're done with all of that stuff.
You talked about
We talked about the
scholarships.
scholarships
Yep.
before. Lego League did not run this year.
Oh, because of COVID?
Right.
Okay.
So we did receive another $1,000. That'll just go into the kitty. And last year we had to dig into another fund to pay the full bill because there's a lot of people, more teams participating in the Lego League.
Which
So
is a good thing.
that's just on hold, if you will, but we did get the extra $1,000 from the Watson Foundation. Next meeting, February 19th. Is that okay?
Works for me.
And then
Works for me.
March 19th.
Yeah, so, in 21-0-21, it seems a bit in the future. There's, obviously you mean 21-21. I mean 2021.
Yes. Typo.
Yep.
Anything else that we need to discuss? Do you got anything, Tom?
I do not. I'm interested in following up on that discussion on the MS9 reporting and getting it so DRA is happy with it. I'm not sure what we need to do to take that next step, but
You're losing me a little bit.
just the issue we brought up with Judy on the
Oh,
the
yes,
reporting.
okay. Yeah.
I'd like to kind of see that resolved. Obviously, it doesn't really have to be resolved until next time we file that report in probably September. But I want to make sure that doesn't just kind of fall through the cracks.
Yeah, I think we're not locked into anything on that. I understand the concept of allocating some of the expense to principal because they're managing principal. At the same time, many trustees of trust funds, ourselves included for many years, managed all of that stuff with no fees at all. So, I guess the difference is we've got a lot more money than we ever used to have.
Right.
I don't have anything else. Jack, Bill, anything else?
No, I'm good, thank you.
Got a last motion?
I move we
Motion to
adjourn.
adjourn.
I second.
All in favor? We are adjourned.
Aye.
All right. Have a great day, guys.
You too,
All right.
Bill.
You too, Bill.